I'd put this in context. It's not as lighthearted as it seems. I was counting, we have about 90,000 newspapers in India. 90,000. And we have 372 TV channels, news channels. If that is not clutter, I don't know what else is. But let's look at the relevance of it all. The 372 news channels put together account for about 10% of the viewership. And the much debated English news channels, about which we are so fond of appearing, account for less than 1%.
I have been with the media for more than 2 decades, and I'm happy to say that I'm glad to be under the scanner.
For the sake of convenience and for identification, we'll number the tables as 1, 2 on my right, and 3 and 4 on our left. And I'm going to invite the panelists on table 1 up to the dais first as I introduce them. The first is Rob Hopkin. Rob is a TV director with the BBC. He's been in Channel 4. He's been specializing in live current affairs and election coverage. His co-panelist in the table is Swati Bhattacharjee. Swati is an assistant editor of the Anandabajar Putrika. She's authored numerous books and articles on social and rural issues. Swati. And the third panelist in table A, or table 1, is Umair Javed from Pakistan. He's a journalist with the Dawn and is a researcher in political sociology. Table 2. In table 2, we have Brendan Miller, senior journalist with the BBC. Involved in interactive and online media. Utpal Chatterjee. Utpal Chatterjee is a veteran journalist. He's also an ex-sheriff of this city. Mr. Chandan Mitra is the third panelist in table B. Mr. Mitra is a member of the Rajya Sabha and is a managing editor of The Pioneer.
My turn to bring on stage tables 3 and 4. On table 3, Jill Robinson, who is the editor of BBC's Big Questions, and a factual TV filmmaker. Joining her is Swati Gautam, who is a writer and an entrepreneur and has studied political science. The third person on table 3 is my very old friend, Poranjoy Gothakudda, the rare species independent journalist, an author and documentary filmmaker. Table 4, Samuel D. Wade Packard, campaign manager of the Democratic Party of the United States of America, a graduate of Yale University. Joining him, Mehmal Safraz, editor of the Daily Times Pakistan, Deputy Secretary General of South Asian Free Media Association. Welcome, ma'am. Last but not the least, Poroma Roy Chaudhary, Director and Country Head of Corporate Communications and Public Affairs of Google India. Welcome, Poroma.
Just to remind you, what we are discussing today is media clutter has compromised credibility. And clutter, I guess, in this question, refers to the presence of too many in a small space. And I'm going to start off with the first question to table A. Why is there so much clutter in the media today? Do we really need so many forms of media and so many subdivisions and so many types of media?
Why is there so much clutter? I think the answer simply is there can be so much clutter. The technology, digital technology especially, enables you to have any number of channels and access points. Do we need it? The second part of the question is, perhaps we don't, but I am so old, I remember that in the UK, there was once only one television channel, and then, amazingly, there became two, and then there were three, and those three had it all their own way for a very long time. And then along came Channel 4, and they sort of carved it up. And then came the digital revolution. And it's the digital revolution that's absolutely sort of going crazy and has been going crazy for the last sort of decade or so in India. And I'm afraid it's a natural consequence. Do we need it? Does television get better because there's so much competition? I suppose a glib answer would be perhaps not. Competition is usually very good for standards. It drives up standards. It might not be the case in media, but I suspect there'll be lots to talk about, so I'm not going to hold it anymore. I'm just going to pass it on to Swati.
Thank you. What is wrong with clutter? Clutter, is essentially bad? Look into your bags. What do you find there? Do you find a neat bag? You don't. We all keep things we don't need. We might have needed. Look into your mobile. Look in the inbox. What do you find? Messages, funny pictures, videos. They make us, the clutter that we make us what we are. And in media, we have so much clutter because that is what personalizes media. It makes us attractive. It makes our readers and our viewers attached to us. They find what they need. There's nothing nonsensical about clutter. Clutter makes sense. Clutter is what we are. So there's so much clutter in media. What's wrong with it?
So I just think there's a lot of clutter in the media because it's profitable to become part of it. At least that's been the case in Pakistan, and I suspect that's the case in India as well. People make money off of it, and that's why you see so many entrepreneurs and businessmen entering this particular space. So, I mean, there's that. And I will say one thing in favor of clutter, is that it does protect journalists in one way, that corporate owners can be less vicious with their employees if they have more options of moving from one particular outlet to another. So that is one advantage of clutter. But other than that, I mean, I just simply see it as a question of profitability. And it is profitable, so we have clutter.
Does the clutter have something to do with the demand for news? Not just profitability, but demand for news.
It is my firm belief that we can't say that the mere proliferation of channels, newspapers, magazines means clutter. One man's clutter is another man's diversity. I believe the media in India at least has become progressively more diverse, reflecting the voices and opinions of newly emerging sections, newly literate sections, newly empowered sections, and on the whole, that is why channels and papers are rising. You may say, how is that true? Because after all, most channels are infotainment channels. They provide more entertainment than information. But they obviously serve a purpose beyond, raking in the moolah for their promoters. In fact, I think 95% of TV news channels are running at huge losses. They don't make money at all. But I think they provide a major social service, a service of information. They are informing people better. And that's why there is an urge. Information, after all, begets more information.
Okay, let me disagree completely with my schoolmate, Dr. Chandan Mitra. We studied in school together. He is academically far superior to me. First, sheer numbers don't imply diversity or heterogeneity. I mean, take India. We have close to 100,000 newspapers, 900 television channels, 300 claiming to be news and current affairs channels. Nag Nagin Ka Shadi, Bhoot Pret Ka Kahani, Amitabh Bachchan Ka Sir Dard, live, breaking, exclusive news. I mean, you call that news? Okay, go. We are the only country in the world when news and current affairs on the radio, Johorda, the only country which calls itself a democracy, when news and current affairs on the radio is still controlled by the government. Okay? Now here, I come from a city which all of you love to hate. Nai Delhi. Lily, don't be silly, you're hotter than a red chili. Ever since you moved to New Delhi. Delhi is the only city in the world with 16 English daily newspapers. Now you thought that's reflecting diversity? No. The top 2 newspapers, the Times of India and the Hindustan Times, account for 75% of the circulation of all English newspapers. So what are the other 14 of them doing there? Because some of them are publications run by individuals sitting on, good property, prime property. The fourth estate is real estate. You've heard that one? Some of them are run by my friend like Chandan Mitro, who has a political affiliation. So is that diversity? Is that heterogeneity? Last point. The media is not like any other product. A newspaper is not like a bag of potato chips. One fills your belly, the other is food for thought. Now, unlike other products or services, the sheer intensification of competition doesn't automatically lead to an improvement in quality. It's not like soap. It's not like toothpaste. That's why you, ladies and gentlemen, are inundated with so much trash every time you switch on the television channel or read your newspaper. That's why you're dumbed down. That's why your intelligence is insulted periodically. And therefore, I humbly submit to you that there is an illusion of diversity. Clutter gives you an illusion of heterogeneity and plurality. It's actually monopolies and oligopolies and dumbing down of content that happens.
The business of the media is not about profitability. If it were so, then they wouldn't go around so scared during times of recession. Neither the newspapers nor the channels are an easy proposition to make money with. The entry barriers are high, the gestation period is very long. So then why are we having so much of media proliferation in our country? Ladies and gentlemen, it's primarily because they are used as tools of influence. It is pure business that can be used to other ends, to other means, and to promote, well, vested interests. What happens then is the lack of regulation in an industry which refuses to call itself commercial or succumb to the rules of what other commercial capitalism should be succumbed to is tragic. The Press Council of India has media barons on board with no teeth. The NBA, the Broadcasters Association, at best can fine you a lakh of rupees. Now, what is a lakh of rupees for channels that have annual revenues above 500, 600, 700 crores? And that too once a year in 5 years? And do you think regulation is going to come easy to India? We haven't had it in so many years, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to think about that. I rest my case for now.
I'd like to sort of confine myself to the world I know best, which is digital. And clutter is actually good. Clutter means diversity. Clutter means pluralism. Clutter means a whole set of opinions which you have otherwise not been able to see or come across. A blogger today can write pretty much anything that he wants. An independent tech blogger, an independent political analyst can, without the support of a big media house or a broadcasting station, can pretty much write a review or a comment or a piece, and depending on the quality of the content, hundreds and thousands of people will see it and have an opinion on it. Internet, that way, is an ungovernable space. It has its flip sides, of course, but the huge tool it is for democracy. I'll give an example. I was a journalist in one life. And in those days, corporate houses could actually call up and stop a story by talking to the editor and threaten to pull out advertising. It doesn't happen in digital. You cannot stop a story. An independent blogger writes somewhere, the story can go viral in minutes. Journalists go to Twitter for stories. Journalists come to Facebook, to Google for stories. You cannot stop a bad story. I can give innumerable examples. I think digital world has been really, really good for plurality of opinions and democracy, and long live Clutter there.
Unfortunately, I don't have anywhere near as much experience or the qualifications that most of the people on this panel have, but I do have, I think, a unique perspective as the youngest person here, so I want to address the question of do we need it from the perspective of a young person? So I think for young people, be it in the United States, be it in Britain, be it in India, when we see this much media, our reaction is not, oh, it's so wonderful that I have 90 television channels to choose to get my news from. It's, wow, all of these people are saying different things. A lot of them seem to just be speaking the opinions that those in power would want them to bring forward. I would rather go on Facebook and look at pictures of pretty girls. I don't think that the digital media that influences us is productive journalism in many cases. I think the reaction of young people to clutter is to go, this is far too complicated for me to sort out, so I'm not going to try. And I think when that happens, you end up with a situation where young people don't form the political opinions that they need to form in order to participate in democracy. And I can speak personally to the challenges this raises for democracy. So as was indicated, I work in media relations and campaign management for the Democratic Party.
It is about profitability, at least in Pakistan it is. Even if a channel is losing out money because of economy and advertisements, but he or she, they do make money outside of it because it's used as a power tool. In the sense that they have influence over the government, over institutions, and then a lot of these channels or individual journalists or the owners have the backing of the military establishment or the powerful bureaucrats, so, individuals. So that's how they make profits due to advertisements, and also because of the power and influence that they generate because of the channels that they own. And also the cross-owner mediaship has also led to this, that the biggest group is Jung Group, which has the largest Urdu circulation newspaper, Jung, and then they have the largest TV channel, Jio. But so they have MSR, the Amir Shakil Rahman, the owner of the channel, of the group, has so much influence that, we've heard people say that, these owners have boasted that, we can bring down governments, or, we can do this to them. And they've done that in the past in the sense that they've influenced, they have the backing of the judiciary, the military establishment, and powerful people in politics. So there's a lot of clutter. That's why a lot of new media channels are coming up in Pakistan, despite the fact that, a lot of journalists are not paid in print media, and even in electronic media, they don't get their salaries on time. But a lot of journalists also make money because of yellow journalism and because of planted stories. That's what they do.
As a program maker, I have found that the proliferation of channels has affected the programs that I can make. And this is because more channels means that the advertising revenue, which funds those channels, is being spread very much more thinly. And that means that program budgets are greatly reduced. Now, there are certain sorts of programs, important programs. They might be investigative programs. They might be programs which are uncovering something that's gone wrong, but they take a lot of research. They take a lot of time to make. Those programs don't always get the best ratings, so they don't always attract the advertisers. But they're important programs. They're very important in our democratic process. Those programs no longer get made. And that's where clutter has really affected.
Coming to something serious, which we haven't discussed about clutter too much, this point about digital clutter, clutter in the digital space. Do you think that having too much clutter in the digital space is a good idea? And I'm going to ask each team to very quickly, within a minute, respond to that. Do you think digital clutter is a good idea?
Ideally speaking, we would want more rigorous fact checking, and we would want people to to think twice before they post something online. But the fact of the matter is that it's just impossible to regulate it. So I mean, clutter in digital space is what we have to contend with for the rest of our existence.
Rob, you wanted a quick word?
I'd certainly, thank you. I don't think we need to regulate the clutter. I don't think we should even begin to get anywhere near thinking about that. All I would say is, as an old news hound, as it were, what the broadcasting media, broadcast news, traditionally used to have to do would be to corroborate stories. And now, because of the sort of instant nature of the web, as it were, and or to use an old-fashioned phrase, but Facebook and Twitter and God knows what. A story can be out there, actually promoted or pushed into the space, by nefarious people with agendas that aren't exactly spreading good word. They're actually spreading poison.
So it can be dangerous.
And the sort of conventional broadcast news would have to corroborate those stories before they would go to print, because they could be in serious trouble for putting out something that was less than truthful or less than valuable information to an audience.
News is very difficult to define, One man's meat is another man's poison. One man's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. One man's intellectual property thief is another person's smart reverse engineer. My view is that the internet dilutes. Just because you have 1,000 friends on Facebook, how many friends do you have in real life? You may not speak to your neighbor, but you're very happy you can communicate to somebody 10,000 miles away instantaneously. There is a problem with the internet. It is easy for anybody to blog, but that doesn't mean every blogger is William Shakespeare. It doesn't mean everybody who puts a podcast is, who thinks he can sing in the bathroom is A.R. Rahman. But it's easy for every citizen to become a journalist, but it's not always possible for every citizen to become a journalist. The issues of factual accuracy, credibility of information. Yes, you can misinform, you can disinform. That internet is abused, misused. It continues to be by terrorists and others, by pornographers. But the point is, the clutter at the end of the day, how good is it for you? Today, the internet is your library of books, it's your newspaper, it's your magazine, it's your radio station, it's your television channel, and more. Yes, it's changing the way we all live, of course. But look at it as a double-edged sword. There's a positive side to it, and of course, there's the other side to it, which is there's an ugly underbelly to it, too.
I think we've debated for a long time about what is news. Have you ever heard of the term naked truth? I think truth is a naked body. You give it a face, and it's called information. You give it clothes and color, and that's called news. And on that note, we'll carry on to the next question.
To table one, we have a sudden proliferation of what is called paid news or saleable news. How do you distinguish between what is sold news and what is news that is reportable?
I think that's where a lot of control rests with editors and producers and media owners. They end up setting the agenda of what counts as what deserves to get airtime or print space and what doesn't. And I think we're now stuck in this suboptimal trap whereby the media's responsibility or its sort of one of its tasks of educating its viewers and its consumers, and at the same time also responding to their demands. So at some point in the past, we came to a point where the demand for saleable news is constantly being met, and it's very hard to break out of this particular cycle. So that task of educating the viewer on what should be reportable, what is credible, that's been left somewhere in the wake. And I say this after having seen both Pakistani media, but also media elsewhere. So I think we're quite stuck in this particular rut of saleability gaining precedence over reportability.
Paid news and saleable news are two different categories altogether.
Yeah.
Paid news, somebody is paying you to plant a particular story, and story ranges from the star cast assembled at his daughter's wedding in a Delhi farmhouse to something in politics. See, it ranges widely. Saleable news, on the other hand, or interesting, something which people like to read. Now, this is slightly different, and I think we need to keep that distinction in mind. Saleable news is not paid for, but saleable news, what we often call saleable news, may have the effect of dumbing down the quality of the publication or the television channel.
Also sensationalizing.
Yes, it's sensational. So I think we should keep that in mind. I believe there's nothing wrong with publicizing saleable news, but I will take a very strong position if there is any paid news that comes to my knowledge or comes to the knowledge of any editor or proprietor for that matter. This is simply not on, because there you have compromised the basic, the most sacrosanct element of a news operation.
I think the question essentially is there a conflict between what is news and what is paid news? You see, it's hard to find out, or hard to make out the news that you hear, was it paid for or not? I mean, we can't, as viewers, always be guaranteed of what is paid for, what is not. But what is newsworthy and what ought to be reported and what ought to percolate down to the masses and what should be given is the responsibility of the media. Is it fulfilling its responsibility by really giving the news that the viewers or the listeners or the readers deserve? That is a very, very big question. Half the time, that doesn't happen. I can't help but recall a particular instance when I met the former Chief Justice of India, Mr. Ahmedi, who told me a horrific story of what he had discovered. After all, we know that the majority of the country lies in these rural areas. He spoke of the semi-rural and the semi-urban areas where you had cable operators who don't come under any kind of authority. These people presenting news to his viewers. And to the viewers, it is, jo dekha wahi sahi, jo suna wahi sahi. Whatever I have seen, whatever I have heard is right. And there are masses, it's incalculable. I mean, you can't imagine how many people really get to listen to such or read, if they manage to read, such news. And this is happening day in and day out, and it's at the peril of the nation, if I may say so. Because after all, those who are doing it are mischief mongers. Those who are doing it are ill-informed. Those who are doing it have no access, as just Ahmedi said, to news agencies even. That is how it is.
Long live Clutter. And also, I think long live loss of credibility. If that means skepticism in the news and what you hear, then I think that's good. I think that's the opposite of what you just described. I've got an uncle, he's about 70 years old, and I was showing him Twitter one day. And he told me, he said, look, Brendan, when I was, all my life, I've got the paper, the Times, London Times, Times of London, and I get down, I start at the beginning, and I end at the end, and then the news is finished. And then I have to buy more papers, and now they've got lots of papers, but now you're telling me that all this stuff, I've got to read all the Twitter feed? When does it finish? How do I finish? And I feel like a lot of what I'm hearing is that kind of approach where they feel kind of overwhelmed by this clutter, this diversity, even when it's not diverse. Just all these voices. To me, it feels like a library, and you're complaining that there's too many books in the library. I think the real crisis, as it were, is about what Jill was talking about, is where's the money? There's lots of things to read in the library, but is there anything worth really reading? You've got so many books, but where's the quality? Where's the meat, the stuff which is really important?
In defense of, if you like, saleable news, in a sense, certainly it's easier to perceive in print than it is in broadcast journalism, because you can read the headline, the banner headline on the red top papers, as it were. You know that's going to be a salacious story about some tittle-tattle, but it's going to get millions of readers because it's so tasty. It might not be what in ivory towers we might consider to be worthwhile, worthy, important news, but the people who are buying the papers, it's their rupees they're using to buy that paper. Let them buy. Don't be grand and say you should not be reading this rubbish. So it is a market. There is a place for saleable news. Just don't obliterate news that actually needs to be out there. But I suspect that even despite the criticism that Indian news channels seem to be coming under, and I'm sure Sam will agree, American news and certainly in the UK, British news channels are guilty of confusing the waters somewhat.
Paranjoy, you've been fighting all your life about news that is often sold or made to sell, as it were. Would you like to comment on that before I go on?
Disclaimer, 3 years I was a member of the Press Council of India. I'm the co-author of a report called Paid News, How Corruption in the Indian Media Undermines Democracy. Some people tried to suppress it. They were unsuccessful. I agree entirely with what Chandan said. You know, you have to draw a line between paid news and saleable news. Paid news is a fraud. It's a deception on the reader, the viewer, the listener. It's advertising masquerading as news. And the problem is it's clandestine, it's surreptitious. Somebody's paid money in cash or kind to put out something, okay? That's one part of the story. But saleable news, everybody wants saleable news. You know, and once again, we can disagree. We know, you know, that if dog bites man, it's not news. But if man bites dog, it will become news. But wait, it depends on who the dog bites. So if the dog bites Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it will be news. If dog bites Bips or Dips or Piggy Chops, yeah, it would be news. So it again depends. And I may correct the gentleman. It was Lord Northcliffe who said that news is what someone somewhere wishes to suppress. The rest, as they say, is advertising. So news is not just the first draft of history. News is not just what the editor wants, what the publisher wants. It's what you want. If you want trash, you'll get it. Of course you will.
I have a very small point to make, please. We are here in Calcutta, and we have 2 leading English dailies here. And both of them, for quite some time, and I say it with a lot of regret, one of them only covers programs for which they are in association with. And they will make it a point to cover those programs. And they will not cover those they are not in association with, however good they may be. And what is this great debate, discussion going to result in? And then the other has institutionalized this even better. I say this as an entrepreneur because both the marketing teams of these dailies are what are the real gatekeepers in Indian media today. Gone are the days of the nice, good old editor, the media baron, who was just the media man. Nowadays, the fingers are in all those pies. So where does it begin and where does it end? And what does this pontification lead to? We're speaking of Calcutta, ladies and gentlemen. How many of us, now one last point, please, gentlemen, please. I, for one, would like to not read both those newspapers. But given that it's very expensive to have a new newspaper come up on the block which can satisfy a reader like me, what do I read? I want to have paper in my hands. I'm sorry, digital media still does not fulfill my utter lust, my utter desire for news every morning. Where do I go?
Reportable news, I view reportable news as being news that a reporter has researched, has tested, and is telling you what they believe is the truth. That's, to my mind, what reportable news is. And that needs a lot of resources behind it. What's happening is that people sell you the news. Freelancers go out to places like Syria. Freelancers go to all sorts of things, and they sell their stories. You do not know if that story is true. You do not have a network behind it. You do not have an editor at home querying the source and checking things. So there is a difference in that sense between reportable news that has got backup and saleable news, which is news that's sold to you. In the UK, we have regulations where you can't sponsor programs, you can't have product placement in programs, you can't really do puff pieces on television, but obviously you can in newspapers, so we don't have that problem. But this other problem is a growing problem, and it's something we should be aware of.
I agree with Paranjoy, particularly on the paid news bit. I'm on the other side of the table now. And there's a very eminent media house, which obviously I can't name. They have open deals on editorial space. Then there are, I mean, it's plain advertising
name
or
them,
worse.
Parma, name them.
Can't. You know that. So, you know, openly advertise editorial space masquerading as advertising. And another thing is very interesting, what is called the private equity deals, which is any small and medium business coverage that you see in some business dailies. These are results of deals of equity being sold for advertising and editorial space. These two, I think, are death knell of good journalism. And I mean, as readers, as advertisers, as whoever backs media should take cognizance of it, and press council should have a really stringent set of laws to prevent this, because at some point then even the entire page one could be sold and you wouldn't know it.
Paper that you're talking about, you see, even sells its masthead. It says, let, dash, 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 wait. That's how it started. So, you see, something we were taught in our journalism, that the masthead is the most sacrosanct part of a newspaper. When you sell the masthead, I think there's nothing left. The whole paper, every story has probably been sold.
In fact, one of the supplements reported on a concert, which was the space already earlier sold. And actually, the edition was closed and the editor went home and the concert never took place. And the supplement carried that the concert was great, and page one carried that the concert never took place.
Now the lines between news that is sold, news that is paid for, and quote-unquote news are getting distinctly blurred.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to take up a comment that Jill made about a reporter should understand what is reportable news. But do you not think it's quite difficult for a reporter to understand what is reportable news if his livelihood depends on not understanding it?
Then he's not a reporter.
Just masquerades as one.
Yeah, I mean, somebody who basically isn't going to probe, isn't going to ask the questions, isn't going to test the sources, is not a reporter. They are passing on gossip and trivia or propaganda.
You know, Dr. Ashok Moitra once made a comment that our media succeed because of reporting death, decay, disaster, and destruction. The 4 Ds of deception.
Actually, it's 3 Cs: crime, cricket, and cinema.
Well, why does it not...
Shall we go down the alphabet?
Why does it not... Why then, Paranjay, instead of crime, cricket, and cinema, does it not change to reporting about compassion, courage, change, and civility? 4 Cs, if you like.
That's because, sir, when you read a newspaper, good news is no news. Bad news is good news. You know, I mean, why would you want to know the good things that people are doing? You want to know about murders and rapes and drought and floods and wars and communal riots. I mean, why would you read a newspaper otherwise? Why would you torture yourself every morning? To feel good?
In Pakistan, a lot of journalists complain, those from the electronic media, that, you know, the crime shows where they reenact crimes and other such things, they get more ratings than serious talk shows on education or healthcare. I mean, then there are shows where they go and raid abortion clinics, or, you know, I mean, there was one instance where they went and raided this house where a same-sex couple was living, and, you know, that show got a lot of rating than other serious talk shows. And then also in the Pakistani media and in Indian media as well, we see frivolous news items like, you know, there are packages on how women parliamentarians have dressed up on their clothes. And, you know, I mean, we saw that in the Indian media when our former foreign minister, Hina Rabani Kar, visited India. And there was a lot more focus on what she was wearing and what she was carrying her handbag than, you know, what she actually said and about her look. So, I mean, that kind of thing sells, unfortunately. And we, the viewers, want to watch it. That's the sad part of it.
Are we really saying, therefore, that the media is willing to lower its standards for the sake of popularity?
See, you seem to forget that there is one very big censor for us out there, and that is our readers, that is our viewers. They don't just consume a lot of cheap stuff. As someone who is in charge of the district editions, let me tell you that we get very strong reactions from our people. They call, they write, they protest, they may even turn up outside our buildings if they feel that what we have written is far from the truth. They care for the truth. Who says they don't? Are they not aware of the politics? Are they not aware of what is happening with their livelihoods? Do they not want to see those things in their papers? They do. And when we have the tenacity, the courage, the skill to carry it out, of course we get good reaction from our readers. I think it is a sort of an escapism to say that media is just serving out cheap stuff. No media runs on that. Look at the way, who is giving credibility, for God's sake, to the democracy in this country? Is it the opposition parties who stall the parliament day after day, who never discuss an issue of importance? They are stalling the parliament over Ramzadeh and Haramzadeh, but where is all the serious issues being raised, the issues of corruption being raised, the issues of scams being raised, the issues of justice to women being raised, for God's sake, if it's not in the media? I think it is, damn unfair and unimaginative to trivialize mainstream media.
I think Shati's made her point.
Rob directs a program, just my last point, called Question Time, which I worked on for 3 years. That had a show last night which got close to 30% share. It had Nigel Farage and Russell, Russell Brand, I forgot his name, debating, huge debate show. Almost 30% of people in Britain who were watching television last night were watching that serious politics debate program. But it was saleable, it was popular, it was interesting. And I think you can do both. And I think you do viewers down. You do them a disservice if you think they'll never watch something about politics or news.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that we've perhaps fallen into the trap of making one bad newspaper tar the entire world of media. I mean, there is media, and some media are, as Shati pointed out, is actually doing very good jobs, very good responsible reporting of what is happening in the rural world. It's not just the Statesman Rural Development or Rural Reporting Award that presented rural reporting. Sainath reports in the Hindu on the rural world all the time.
Used to. The media is not undifferentiated. The media is heterogeneous. There are good guys and not so nice guys. There are journalists who believes, as the old saying goes, it leads if it bleeds, correct? But there are also people, and I quote the American humorist and writer Finley Peter Dunne, 1867 to 1936. He said the role of the journalist is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. The problem is that, as Rudhanshu said, there are dogs and dogs. There are watchdogs. There are dogs that can bark but cannot bite. There are lap dogs. And there are also intelligent guide dogs. There are all kinds of journalists and media people. Yep.
Earlier, Brendan compared the Clutter to a library. He said he didn't really see it as clutter, but a nice, organized library, which I think is very telling. I mean, I think he's right that there are young people who find the diversity of media options available to them very appealing. It seems like, Brendan is the sort of person who likes libraries. I'm also the sort of person who likes libraries, as young people who are interested in politics and the media. But I think the reality is that most young people don't spend their Friday nights in libraries. I think that most young people are actually put off by this, and I think there's also a sort of maybe a cultural divide here between Britain and the United States. So in the United States, a significant portion of the population actually believes that our president was not born in the country and therefore constitutionally shouldn't be president. Still, despite heaps upon heaps upon heaps of evidence being produced to the contrary. And I think that if you look at the United States, you see the sort of end stage of a place where there's never really been much centralized media regulation, where there's always been a tremendous, tremendous degree of constitutionally protected freedom of the press. And it's quite scary, the sort of things that get put out in the public sphere. And I think that things are going much better in Britain, and maybe for that reason young people are more interested in politics, more likely to not be turned off by the clutter, because I think there probably is less clutter, or at least what there is there isn't as widely attended to by most young people.
Does that mean we really do need broadcasting standards, perhaps somewhat stringent broadcasting standards? And if we do need broadcasting standards, should this apply to the digital media as well? And finally, do these need to be different in the developing and in the developed world?
Who decides? Who decides what is good, what can be my quality, can be lack of your quality? I mean, by definition, it's a personal opinion, I am not in favor of regulation of censorship of any kind, because it is ultimately a battle that you would go to lose. You cannot decide what adult citizens should watch or hear or read. I mean, you can definitely have quality standards, but what Paranjoy calls as trash, for somebody it could be quality content. So I don't really understand the whole idea of prescribing norms and having watchdogs to make sure that people are following. I can give you an example of YouTube, which gets into maximum problem on content regulation. You have community guidelines, you have terms of service. In India, you cannot show murder, you cannot show frontal nudity. The community will prevent you from doing it. So I think the users or the readers are the best judges themselves. We really don't need watchdogs. That's what I feel.
I think that there should be regulation, but not by the government. At least not in my country. I wouldn't want the government.
Self-regulation.
Yeah, there should be self-regulation because we've seen during the blasphemy issue is a very sensitive issue in Pakistan. So we saw that there were a lot of programs against Governor Punjab Shahid Salman Taseer before he was assassinated. And a lot of people said that his assassination was also, part of it was because of what the media was showing and what it was printing and what it was showing in the talk shows against him. So something like that, that one of the anchors, I wouldn't name her, but anyway, she's still on a very big channel. She's still hosting a program on another channel. So I mean, there should be some sort of regulation. People like her or other people who are actually inciting violence should not be allowed on air. It's the same with the mullahs. A lot of mullahs do that on our channels. So they should not be permitted. But there's no self-regulation in Pakistan. But I do feel that a lot of channels and the print media, they should come up with this code of conduct. And then they should follow it through. They should not just do things for ratings and sensationalism. There should be responsible journalism as well. And there should be consequences for anchors who cross a certain red line.
This is all about trust. A viewer or a reader has to be able to trust what they're consuming. And in the UK, we do have regulation, and the regulation is to give them that ability to trust. So you've got a point of, in television, you have somewhere to go if you need redress, if you've been involved in a television production and they've manipulated or misrepresented what you've said, there's a place you can go to. The BBC Trust, or you can go to Ofcom and complain. And that regulator has to be independent. They have to have real powers, perhaps to fine or to sanction or to otherwise provide redress. And it has to be free of political interference or interference by proprietors, or people who run newspapers, or even people who work in TV or non-newspapers. It has to be independent before you, the viewer, can trust it. We've had a major rumpus in the UK after the News of the World, one of the Murdoch papers, abused trust and used methods which were frankly disgraceful. Criminal, disgraceful. And some of them got off, sadly.
So coming from a country where we don't have any sort of centralized system of redress when something untoward happens in the media, the big concern I have, and I think my fellow panelists over here raised this concern as well, is not so much whether such a system would be a good thing were it to come into existence. The question is, how do we bring it into existence? Specifically, how do we ensure that the process by which people are put on the Board of Appeals, or whatever you call it, are independent? How do you guarantee that through the political process?
We've been hearing people from the two sides of Atlantic, where matters are totally different and from what it is here in India. You see, it's a vastly different country, a large country, and with the word my colleague here just had used a little while back, such diversity of languages. Mr. Sarkar, in his introductory speech, was speaking of how many newspapers there are and how many news channels there are, and he did not mention how many languages they are in and how they are being guided or misguided. If I take off from what Shati last said, you see, there are people here who are responsible, who are conscientious journalists, who are people who try to live, to the ideals of journalism. Let's not make a mockery of the entire world of journalism or the media simply because some people have gone astray. Some people are being paid to do this, or some people are doing whatever they getting away scot-free. This is not it at all. Let's come to that. They are very conscientious journalists, and thanks to them, the journalism is alive, and thanks to them, that the information technology is there among the masses.
So you're saying there is no need for regulation because we have enough good journalists.
Tell
and
me,
the media is above
who
board.
in this country, I'll start with Mr. Sarkar, since there is an interaction between the panel and the audience, I can well ask Mr. Sarkar, whom I know over the years. Well, is there any body, any authority in India that can regulate? Yes or no?
Regulate.
He says no. There you are. You have
Regulate.
got the answer to the question from the supreme authority of the person who can regulate or not regulate.
Okay.
I just simply I endorse this point and want to just make it very plain that the media cannot be regulated, it is not regulated and should not be regulated.
If we do need broadcasting standards, should this apply to the digital media as well? And finally, do these two need to be different in the developing and in the developed world?
It's not that the government or the chairman of the board of governors at the BBC, the BBC Trust or whatever, says this is what you must put in the news. That's not how it works. We all, if you like, broadcast because we stay within a rather good framework which encourages honesty, openness, fairness, and a responsibility to doing the right thing by the audience. Now, I know that sounds a bit like
utopia,
waffle, but actually, because, if you like, the rules were put in place when broadcasting was in its infancy, if you like, before Pandora's box was opened, it was quite easy for all subsequent developments to work underneath that. Obviously, fate and history has decreed that India, the box is well and truly open and everything is kind of exploded. To try and put any kind of structure back on that is probably impossible, but there is that option that you don't, it's not a dead hand of regulation, it is a controlling, overseeing that broadcasters are fair, honest, and if you like, they are responsible even before law to deliver those minimum standards. And they are minimum standards.
If there are politicians there doing something wrong, there's the media there to point it out. If there are engineers doing something wrong, or doctors or lawyers, there's the media there to point it out. If the media is doing something wrong, then who's there to point it out?
Okay. Who treats the doctors? Who judges the judges? Who polices the policemen? You know, I agree with much of what is said, but I want to point out 2 or 3 things. Regulation is not for the nice guys. Regulation is for the rogue elements. Regulation is for the journalists who are journalists only in name. They're actually cheats and blackmailers and worse. They're not just stenographers. They're worse than that. The problem in India, and we have a lot to learn from the Federal Communications Commission, the Office of Communications, the Press Complaints Commission, is right now what we have is regulatory chaos. In an ideal world, self-regulation is indeed the best form of regulation. We have the Advertising Standards Council of India, which is a self-regulatory body. After 3 decades, suddenly wondering, you know, whether all the fair and lovely cream, fair and ugly cream, there should be some restraints on those. We have the BAAA and we have the NBSA. But look at the chaos we have. We have a Central Board of Film Certification. We have a Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. We have a Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. We have a Press Council of India, which cannot punish anybody. We have a Computer Emergency Response Team in the Department of Electronics and Information Technology. And we have complete regulatory chaos. Yes, I do agree with much of what has been said. You need autonomy for the regulator. You need independence for the regulator. You need to ensure that it's free of government control, free of control from the media. But it's not enough to say that you have a remote in your hand. I don't think so. Because reputations have been damaged. And it's one thing to say that there are libel laws, there are defamation laws. It's often that, certainly in a country like India, the law takes its own time to be implemented. The law is often not properly implemented. And my only suggestion is, I'm a journalist, I have a lot of respect with Polda, for all the nice guys. Shati, people like you are doing great work. But there are some other guys too, you know. The nasty guys, you want me to name some of them? I'll do so, you know, in public too. I mean, here they are, media barons fighting with each other. Sting operations being conducted on a school teacher falsely accused of enticing her students into prostitution. I mean, this is also that great Indian media circus. So what we're not saying, go after the nice guys. But then if we cannot cleanse those nasty, the black sheep in our midst, somebody has to do it.
Where does ethics conflict with profitability? So is newspapers, television channels, and the so-called openness of the digital world only for profit, or are there ethical standards to be met as well?
Well, media is a business. I mean, you also must understand that media is also a for-profit business, like any other business. Like hospitals are a business, schools are a business, universities are businesses. So there's nothing wrong with being profitable. You're not doing a public service entirely. But at the same time, selling a newspaper is not like selling soap. And if you are in the business of information, the responsibility doubles of being ethical, being transparent, being truthful. So I don't think ethics and profitability not necessarily cannot coexist. There are honest businessmen.
Media is an industry. And it also compromises ethics a lot, this whole profit-making business. It does. I mean, yes, there are a lot of good journalists in Pakistan, as a journal friend once told me, that he said, you know, I make a lot of money because of television programs, but that money is actually because of the truth that I say. I get so many threats from terrorist organizations, establishment, and other people that now I've had to invest all that money in a bulletproof car because of death threats. So, I mean, yes, there are good journalists, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of journalists, newcomers who don't have any training. There's no editorial control over what goes on air, especially on the electronic media. At least in the print media, you know, you'll print a correction the next day and apologize. But in the electronic media, you don't. If there's a terrorist attack and there are 100 deaths officially, one channel will say, oh, there are 125. The next will say 150 deaths. And then they will not apologize. So that's something, you know, they do. It's all about ratings. It's all about breaking news. This whole breaking news syndrome has compromised ethics, credibility of the media. And that it's all because of profits and, you know, what they sell. So that's something that we have to think about. That's why I was talking about self-regulation or a code of conduct, but not by the government. I don't want the government to interfere in it. What I want is that the media should come together and, you know, discuss this and then go about it, so that ethics are not, there's credibility and there's fact-checking, especially in the electronic media, which there's not much of it.
So I'm thinking about things like reality television, for example, which has become very, very popular. And that makes money for the producers of those programs, who sell it to a number of different outlets across the world and a number of broadcasters. And they develop the formats and they sell the formats. And they're very pressured by the commissioning channels to deliver ratings. Now, what happens is that these so-called reality shows, they're under pressure to basically to mold or to distort the reality, to make them more entertaining, to create jeopardy, to poke fun at the participants, and to manipulate the outcome. And that's a case where ethics go out of the window and profitability and credibility. Well, credibility's gone as well, and it's all done in the name of actually selling a program and an idea and a format. And that is one of the things that's happened more and more with plurality of channels over the last sort of 10, 20 years.
I certainly think that profitability may be an enemy of truth, but I think ideology might be as big an enemy, if not a bigger one. So I'm one of the bad guys here, not like most of the people on this stage. Like, I'm trying to manipulate voters into doing what I want them to do by manipulating reporters into saying the things that I want them to say. And I have my little notebook of reporters' phone numbers here. And I can tell you that because there are so many media outlets in the United States right now, there are people in this book who I can call up and say, here is the story we want you to run. You know, I have to provide them with some facts. They're not completely and utterly heinous in how they do this, but they will generally believe the things that I say because they work for newspapers or for television outlets that are ideologically affiliated with the party that I work for. There are other people in this notebook who I would never let ask a question to any of my candidates if I could, because I know that no matter what my candidate says, it will be turned against me. So I think that 50 years ago, when we had newspapers of record, and those were the ones who everyone read, I think this was probably less of a problem. I think the propagation of ideologically focused newspapers and of television channels is one of the biggest issues in this discussion and one of the biggest enemies to truth.
You're vigorously nodding your head. You want to say something?
I love how candid he is. I mean, it's wonderful to meet a spin doctor telling us the tricks of his trade. You know, I just want to add to what she said. You know, one of the biggest scams in India is something called TAM, television audience measurement. It's one of the most inadequate, incomplete, and corrupt systems. And Johorda, I'm glad you're going to broadcast it on Doordarshan, because Doordarshan suffers because of that. We have a country of about 140 to 150 million households, right? You have about less than 10,000 people meters. That's 0.0002% of your population. Large parts of the country, you know, there are no meters to check viewing habits. There are 600,000 villages in the country where people watch television even where there's no electricity. They watch it on battery power, no measurement. You know, so what happens at the end of the day? And this is corrupt. You can manipulate it. And so what happens at the end of the day? Your viewer is your consumer. You're not interested in providing information. Forget empowering, educating people. You're just trying to sell products and services to consumers. But that's the unfortunate aspect of the dependence that we have on this kind of flawed, inadequate, and corrupt television audience viewing system. And I dare say some of that also spills over to the internet space as well as to the newspaper space as well.
I just think we're imagining a sort of Never Never Land in the past, where everything was, you know, newspaper of record and people were honest. And that's just not true. In the First World War, the Second World War, newspaper editors were almost made ministers because they were so in the pockets of the politicians. It's just not true that there was once a sort of impartial media and now it's all corrupt. I think that the problem that I think that also Clutter can also help us. If you're worried about media organizations having too much power, then for my generation anyway, the Twitter can act as a kind of a police on factual errors, and I just think there's a lot more good news out there in terms of what's going on in media at the moment that is exciting, and I'm worried that we've sort of become a bit too negative and too sort of rose-tinted about the way we view the past. But I'll pass over.
The thing is very simple. I hope I don't sound too simplistic when I say profitability is necessary. Of course, without profits, how can you do it? But today, profitability is a major factor. It's become too high. That is because, judging from the observation from somebody in the audience, I could well realize what he was going back to. The age when the editor was all important. He represented all that was ethical and important and responsible and conscientious. That age is gone. Today, the advertising department has taken over. It's they who rise to become managing directors and chairmen of the papers, and they are the ones who decide what the policy would be. Much as Kunal loved, and very rightly so, the story of Shati and Swachh Bharat and the toilets, the fact is, if we want more of this, we also need to have a very conscientious, good, effective editor at the helm of affairs, and not some advertising person thinking of how he could best put that off for a later date when, that will become stale, and put in another ad instead. There was a time when the editor could push the display ad for some other day and put the story in instead. I'm longing for that day to resurrect itself.
If we all agree that journalism is an occupation and that it is a fairly sort of well-defined occupation, then the ethical framework should emerge from within the occupation itself. The ethics should be occupational ethics, and that is something that journalists should end up doing then. And if we feel that enough good journalists out there can come to an agreement on what counts as ethical reporting and ethical editing, then we will have a self-regulating mechanism that is particular to this occupation, just like we've had it with doctors and lawyers and judges and so on. And so we can call out those who don't fall on those ethical guidelines and those who do.
But I want to raise a question. Is something which is made just with profit in mind necessarily bad? Now look at the Saas Bahu serials. All these serials made of, mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, and feminists have been complaining so loudly that these show women in very bad light. They just sit in their houses and they quarrel over each other's husbands, and they are just interested in dresses and jewel, and this is showing women in very poor light. And definitely what Isha Kapoor never made any of that with empowering women in mind. But when a research was conducted on what was the impact of cable TV on women, first when cable TV was introduced and after 5 years, it was found that quite unintentionally, there has been a decline in the number of children women have, and women are refusing to put up with domestic abuse, and they are making their men do more housework. So none of this was intended, but it happened, which I think indicates that we cannot always assume beforehand what kind of impact a program will have on what audience. If a program is well made, if a program is not made with a malicious intent, then just the fact that it is made with profit in mind does not make it bad program, bad journalism.
In fact, if a program is good, if it is well liked, if a newspaper is good, it will sell. It will make profits. So I don't see why this holier than thou attitude of some of the jholawalas of the 70s and 80s who have this contemptuous attitude towards profit and try to say there has to be ethics and there has to be TAM has to be replaced by RAM and MAM or whatever. I think there's absolutely no need whatsoever. Things are running fine. There's absolutely, people are the best judge. They have chosen, always chosen and exercised their judgment correctly. They have dethroned established newspapers from the number 1, number 2 positions, and they've dethroned channels. The channels move up and down, and that's because of quality, nothing to do with numbers. I think that is of no consequence, and we should not, please, let us not go back to the Indira Gandhi years and start regulating and set up more and more regulatory authorities and bodies who will be a bunch of corrupt people who will fleece the producers, who will fleece the newspaper and magazine owners, and ultimately line their pockets, and public will stand to lose. Regulation has been very bad in India, and it has been unenforceable. Therefore, I fear that any talk of regulation can be very, very dangerous. Society is different in India compared to Britain or the US. Keep that in mind.
I was lenient with one friend, so I'll be lenient with another.
One
okay,
sentence.
Poranja, you have the last say.
One sentence. Once upon a time it used to be said journalism was a mission. Now just some journalists work only for a commission. Shati, some of us like to watch mother-in-laws emotionally blackmailing daughters-in-law at 9 o'clock in the evening for entertainment. I prefer Arnab Goswami any time, He saves the nation for me every evening. And there are 8 people on small boxes, and all of them are speaking simultaneously, so I can't make out what anyone is saying.
So I have to be an Arnab Goswami and stop you. I think through the passage from clutter to profit, good or bad, we have touched on a number of very, very significant and important things so far the media is concerned. I don't think whether the media has been on the scanner or not is a different matter altogether, but I think important issues have been raised. Diversity, dumbing down, sellability, the selling of news, people who sell news, how do we judge if that is credible or not? We have discussed the whole issue of regulation with strong voices for regulation. If you are a private enterprise making profit, you should be open to regulation. to Chandan Mitra saying there should be no regulation, that will take us back to the dark days of the emergency. And finally, the biggest conundrum of all, how do you reconcile ethics with profitability? I think these are some of the issues that have been raised, but I'm sure there'll be a better articulation of these from my co-moderator, Shondeep Chatterjee.
Just to finish up and summarize what we've heard from some great speakers this evening, they've told us that clutter is good for competition, but they've also admitted that you have to engage in a treasure hunt to trace the truth amidst the clutter. They've told us that there is saleable news, but by and large, they've confessed that most of them operate from their conscience and do not work only on the basis of what sells. And yet, they have admitted also that the Indian media is politically free today, but it is imprisoned by thoughts of profit. There has been unanimous disagreement about the necessity of a self-regulation versus a regulatory body. And finally, in the question of ethics, we've heard that there is always a controversy between ethics and payments. And you know, again, if I may end with an observation, whenever you go to a discussion amongst doctors, the question arises, why are doctors in this country not ethical? When you come to a discussion about media, we end up with the same question, why are our media not ethical? I think the fundamental answer is that we are Indians first and doctors, media, engineers, lawyers later on. And the time has come for us to question how much ethical standards we follow as a country. Why do we have a confrontation between ethics and payments? Why can we not reach a stage when ethics pays?